Located in the heart of downtown Phoenix is the Hotel San Carlos, one of Arizona's most talked about haunted places. Sitting on the corner of Central and Monroe, the Hotel San Carlos has been a fixture of downtown Phoenix since 1928. It can also be seen very briefly in the center of the opening scene of one of my favorite movies, Psycho. By the time Psycho was filmed, the hotel had been in operation for 32 years and was known as one of the nicest hotels in Phoenix. It was so nice that it hosted many celebrities such as Mae West, Marilyn Monroe, and Clark Gable. Not only was it one of the places to stay, it was also one of the places to be seen. Over the years, staff and visitors alike have reported seeing a woman wandering the hallways who promptly disappears before their eyes. The sounds of children laughing and crying, as well as disembodied footsteps, are also frequently reported. A few guests have even said that they were awoken in the middle of the night by a knock on their door, only to find no one there. The hotel sits on the site of Phoenix's first school, which is often listed as being the cause for the disembodied sounds of children that are sometimes heard. Originally built in 1874, the small adobe building served the children of Phoenix until 1879, when it was replaced by a larger brick structure. Known as the Central School, the building remained in use until it was condemned in 1916. By 1920, it was finally demolished with plans to build a $1 million hotel on the site. While the school buildings themselves are long gone, one piece of history remains, and it's located in the basement of the hotel. While it doesn't look spooky, this is the oldest part of the building, the original well. The original well is located underneath the modern electric pump. If you remove the pump, inside would be the brick-lined well that was dug for the first school in 1874. I've come across stories that claim children fell into the well and drowned, and that is the cause of some of the paranormal activity. Despite digging deep into the history, I have found nothing to support this story. One of the unique features of the hotel was that the original well provided chilled water to all of the hotel rooms until sometime in the 1970s. At that point, it was switched over to be used for the air conditioning system. The original water spigots can still be found in most of the hotel rooms today. I've stayed at the hotel a couple of times. The last time was a few years ago. Matt and I were lucky enough to be staying there on a not-so-busy night and were given a tour of the building. The front desk clerk told us that just a couple of nights previously, she'd had a really strange experience. It was quiet, and she was sitting at the front desk. The lobby was empty, and she heard a loud banging noise coming from around the corner. The only thing around the corner was a short hallway leading to the stairwell. As she got up to check it out, she heard a loud crash and the sound of glass breaking. When she rounded the corner, she saw broken glass lying on the floor underneath a framed collection of old hotel photos. The frame was still hanging perfectly straight on the wall, with half of the glass missing. She couldn't explain how it happened, as there was no one else in the lobby. Later, she checked the security camera footage to see if someone had come from the stairwell, and no one had been in that area for hours prior to the noise. As we explored the different floors of the hotel, I kept thinking about Leone Jensen, the Hotel San Carlos's most famous spirit with the saddest story. Growing up in Phoenix and having had an interest in the paranormal since a young age, it was a story I was pretty familiar with, or so I thought. The most common version goes something like this. Leone Jensen was a 22-year-old woman who was staying on the 7th floor of the hotel. She had just traveled from across the country to meet with her fiancé in Phoenix. Once she arrived, she found out that he no longer loved her. Heartbroken and alone, she made her way up the stairs on the 7th floor to the penthouse and jumped from the roof. While that story isn't the most accurate depiction of Leone's last day, people have reported seeing a woman in a long dress on the roof of the hotel. When they try to get a better look at her, they find that she's disappeared. The wispy figure of a woman has also been seen walking the hallways of the hotel. When we finished the tour, Matt and I went to check out the rooftop pool. It said that this was Marilyn Monroe's favorite hotel to stay at while she was in Phoenix. She would request a room on the 3rd floor so that she could easily access the pool and would sunbathe here for hours. After taking some pictures of the pool, we decided to turn in, and because it had been a very long day of driving, we both passed out pretty quickly. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom, and while I was standing in front of the sink, I heard a strange sound coming from the room above us. I stood there for a good 30 seconds or so, just listening to it, trying to figure out what it was. The only way I can describe it is that it sounded like someone was dragging a heavy piece of furniture across a wood floor. Not something you would really expect to hear in a hotel in the middle of the night. By the time I woke Matt up, the sound had already stopped, and I sat there trying to figure out what could have made that noise. The main problem I had was that the rooms and hallways in the upper floors of the hotel were all carpeted, and the bathrooms have tile floors. On top of that, we hadn't heard any sounds other than when we were in the lobby, and I don't think there were more than just a few people staying in the entire hotel that night. Because she has become such a big part of the hotel's haunted history, let's talk about Leone's legend and what the real story is. I covered the generic version of the legend earlier, but let me share some of the other versions. One says that her fiancé was a bellhop at a nearby hotel. Another claims that she didn't jump but was pushed from the roof by her fiancé. And yet another claims the fiancé's new lover pushed Leone. Because so many years have passed since her death, it's impossible to verify a lot of the information. But I've been able to piece together a much clearer picture of her life and also her untimely death. In the early morning hours of Monday, May 7th, 1928, a merchant patrolman, kind of like a security guard today, named N.J. George was on bicycle patrol through the streets in downtown Phoenix. He was headed north on Central and had just reached Van Buren, which was 1 block north of the hotel, when he heard a piercing scream followed by a thud. He quickly turned his bike around and headed south towards the direction of the sound. As he got to the corner of Central and Monroe, he saw the body of a woman lying on the sidewalk near the corner of the hotel on the Monroe Street side. Today, the hotel has a large awning that wraps around the front of the building. But back in 1928, there was no awning. Here is how the police described the scene upon their arrival. Quote, "The body was fully dressed, even to a lightweight tan-colored summer coat and hat to match. Miss Jensen wore a thin, rose-colored dress of good material, light shoes, and stockings. Found clutched tightly in her hands were her purse and hat. Inside her purse were 2 short suicide letters written on Hotel San Carlos stationery and 2 almost illegible notes that were scribbled on the back of an envelope and telegraphed blank. The letters were dated May 7th, 1928, 1:15 a.m., an hour and 30 minutes before Patrolman George found her body." The local papers quickly picked up the story, and by the following day, Leone's death made the papers in both Arizona and California. The papers described Leone as a, quote, pretty 22-year-old of the extreme blonde type. One article from the Petaluma Argus-Courier claimed that there were only 2 suicide letters, one of which blamed a local bellhop for bruises found on her body. The article goes on to state that the bellhop was later questioned and released. No other information was given, and that is all that was ever mentioned in the papers about a possible bellhop connection. The 3 suicide letters were placed in 2 envelopes addressed to specific people. One was addressed to Undertaker, Phoenix. Included in the same envelope was a letter addressed to Jack M. Edwards, Undertaker, Los Angeles. The final letter was described as a rambling, almost illegible affair bidding goodbye to her friends. Some of the last words Leone Jensen ever wrote were, "Darn this hotel pen." To the Phoenix Undertaker, Leone wrote instructions for him to forward her other letter to the Undertaker in LA. She also gave an explanation for her decision to end her life. She stated, "Nervous breakdown, here for lung trouble, too weak to walk, lost appetite, doctors make me sick, have had too many, just another lonesome and ill stranger." The letter that was addressed to the Undertaker in LA, Jack Edwards, was written in a way that makes me believe they knew each other. The letter was as follows. "My burden was more than I could carry, so I'm coming back home in the way I predicted, but not as a suicide. But this long-living agony is too much for me, and now having suffered a nervous breakdown, I could never go through with it. I'm too weak to walk, and all in all, I am through. Here are a few of my last requests. Bury me in my tan dress and tan high-heeled slippers. Organ music above all things. And can you arrange for 2 girls to sing, as I have always loved harmony? Nearer my God to thee, if there is one, and some other one which I wish you to select. Need a Marcel, and my nails are terrible, but have been too sick to care for anything. Goodbye and good luck. Think of me kindly." Lastly, to the hotel manager, she left basic instructions about who would take care of her bill, the Phoenix Undertaker, asking them to make sure all of her belongings were packed up and apologizing for only having $5. She states her income was to arrive on the 10th, but it wasn't to be. These letters don't sound like someone who is heartbroken and has decided to end their life over it. It sounds like someone who has been sick for quite some time and just didn't want to deal with the struggle anymore. So who was Leone, and how did she end up in Phoenix? Leone was born in Minnesota on April 14, 1896, to Danish parents who had immigrated a couple of years prior to her birth. By 1915, she was living in Washington State and had married a Greek candy maker named Seraphine Banyan at the age of 18. Things between the two of them didn't seem to turn out so well, as they were divorced within 2 years. One of the last times she shows up as Mrs. Banyan was when her husband had her charged with theft for stealing his suitcase full of personal belongings. The charges were later dismissed. By 1920, Leone was back in California living with her mother and siblings. Leone was 24 years old and was working as a theater dancer. At some point between 1920 and 1928, her health began to seriously decline. In one of her letters, she mentioned lung trouble, and it's most likely that she was suffering from tuberculosis. Because this was prior to the invention of antibiotics to treat TB, one of the most common ways to combat this disease was to move to a warm, dry climate. The police would later state Leone had been in Phoenix for 2 to 3 weeks prior to her death. I believe she was probably staying in one of the TB sanitariums around the Phoenix area. She probably had enough of the treatments or realized they simply weren't working and checked into the hotel before heading back to California. From her own words, it doesn't appear that she ever intended to stay in Phoenix. In fact, she knew she would return home. I believe she knew she would return home in a coffin. I just don't think she initially intended to commit suicide. From Leone's own words, she was physically and mentally worn out. While researching, I found that Leone had checked into the Hotel San Carlos on May 5th. Just 2 days before her death. While the legend states she was on the 7th floor, she was actually staying on the 3rd floor, and her room did not face the street. This is important because the 3rd floor has direct access to the rooftop pool. In 1928, there was no pool. It was simply a sun deck. But something I noticed while staying at the hotel was that the pool area had direct access to the roof via the fire escape. On the very top of the hotel is the penthouse, which the hotel owner lived in with his family. To get to the penthouse, you have to climb stairs that are located on the 7th floor. The legend states that Leone was able to sneak up into the penthouse and out onto the roof. While not impossible, I think it's pretty improbable. Leone would have had to have known that she could access the roof through the penthouse that the owner lived in. She would also have had to manage not being discovered while attempting to get out onto the roof. Her other option would have been to access the fire escape from the sun deck and climb the ladders to the roof. While the ladder to the roof is not attached today, old pictures of the hotel from the 1930s show the fire escape going all the way up. Also, her body was found on the Monroe side of the street. The fire escape is also closest to that side, whereas the penthouse faces Central Avenue. So where did the bellhop come from? While it's possible that the other letter described as a rambling, almost illegible affair mentioned something about a boyfriend or perhaps a bellhop, the details were never made public. It seems that she was pretty straightforward with her reasons in the letter to the LA undertaker. Leone's body was sent to Los Angeles by train the following day on May 8, 1928. It seems as if her requests were honored and she had a small service at the Jack M. Edwards Funeral Parlors on May 10th. You can visit Leone's grave at the Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California. And that brings us to the end of the real story of the haunted Hotel San Carlos. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. As always, my name is Jennifer Jones. See you next time.